The sun shone hard over Brookside Plaza, glinting off the lines of parked cars and glass storefronts. Sunday mornings here were usually calm, families moving from store to store, kids with ice cream cones melting faster than they could eat, music spilling gently from speakers above the plaza. It was the kind of place that made people feel safe. But safety was something that could vanish in an instant, and Jamal Thompson was about to learn how fragile that illusion could be. At 16, Jamal carried himself with quiet confidence. A straight-A student at Lakeside High, he was the kind of teenager teachers bragged about and parents admired. His mother often said he was born old, too responsible for his age, and she wasn't entirely wrong. Jamal had already been accepted to Stanford on a full scholarship, his letter of acceptance still pinned to the fridge at home, the pride of his entire family. Today wasn't supposed to be extraordinary. He had one simple mission: to find the perfect birthday gift for his little sister, Sophia. Inside the Fashion Hub boutique, Jamal stood in front of a display table, holding up a soft blue sweater against the light. It looked exactly like the one Sophia had mentioned in passing last week. He smiled and snapped a photo, sending it to his mom. "Sophia's gonna love this, right?" A moment later, her reply came in short and warm. "She will. Be safe out there." He could almost hear her voice when he read it. At the counter, a young white cashier named Emily Carter greeted him with the easy cheer of someone who liked her job. "That'll be $47 even," she said. Jamal handed over his debit card. The machine beeped once, then displayed approved. Emily smiled, printed the receipt, and tucked it carefully into the bag. "Your sister's lucky. These just came in yesterday." "Yeah," Jamal said, returning her smile. "She's turning 12. Big day. Then she's gonna love it." He thanked her, took the small shopping bag, and headed toward the door. Outside, sunlight poured into the corridor, glinting off polished tiles. Everything felt ordinary, until a sharp, high-pitched alarm shattered the calm. It came not from Fashion Hub, but from an electronics store 3 doors down. Security guard Kevin Morales pressed a hand to his earpiece. "We've got a theft at Gadget World," he said into his radio, eyes scanning the crowd. "Male suspect fleeing east exit. Description?" came the dispatcher's crackling voice. Morales squinted toward the moving shoppers. Black male, late teens, dark sweater, backpack. That single sentence, vague, careless, and dangerous, hung in the air like a spark waiting for fuel. There were dozens of people in that plaza, but of all of them, Jamal happened to be the only black teenager visible in that section, standing 50 feet away, checking his phone. He didn't know about the call. He didn't know that at that very moment, his skin had just become a uniform in someone else's mind. Morales' gaze fixed on him. "I've got eyes on a possible suspect," he said quietly into the radio and started moving. Jamal's phone buzzed again. A message from MT. "On my way, son. Be safe out there." His father, Marcus Thompson, always texted that when Jamal went anywhere alone. Jamal smiled, thumbs tapping a quick reply. "Love you too, Dad." He never got the chance to send it. Across town, a police cruiser flickered its lights to life. Officer Derek Hayes, a man whose uniform fit too tight around his ego, was already accelerating toward the plaza. In his passenger seat sat Officer Michael Chen, younger, quieter, still learning how to navigate the gray spaces between duty and morality. Hayes had a reputation, 2 complaints for excessive force in the past year, both dismissed. In his mind, those weren't warnings. They were proof that he could push the line and walk away clean. When Morales' call came through, black male suspect, dark sweater, backpack, Hayes didn't hesitate. He didn't ask for footage or clarification. He just pressed harder on the gas. Jamal stepped out through the glass doors into the open air. The sunlight was bright enough to make him squint. He adjusted his backpack and pulled out his phone again. A new text from Sophia flashed on the screen. "Can't wait to see what you got me." Jamal grinned and started typing a reply. "Hey, you stop right there." The voice boomed across the parking lot. Jamal looked up. 2 officers were striding toward him, one tall and broad with a hard face, the other following a few steps behind. "Me?" Jamal asked, confused. "Don't move." The taller officer, Hayes, closed the distance in seconds. "Put your hands where I can see them." Jamal froze, pulse quickening. "Officer, I think there's been a mistake. I said don't move." Hayes barked, his hand resting on his gun. People nearby began to pause, heads turning. Jamal raised both hands slowly, the shopping bag in one, phone in the other. I just bought something for my sister. Turn around. What? Turn around. Hayes grabbed Jamal's shoulder and spun him roughly against a parked car. The metal seared against Jamal's palms, hot from the sun. Empty your pockets now. Jamal's voice shook. I just bought this. I have a receipt. Now. With trembling hands, he emptied his pockets. Wallet, keys, phone. Hayes snatched them and threw them onto the hood. What's in the bag? A sweater and a hat for my sister's birthday. The receipt's right there. Hayes ripped open the bag, inspected the items, and sneered. Anyone can fake a receipt. He crumpled the paper in his fist and tossed it to the ground. Jamal stared in disbelief. That's real. The cashier can confirm it. Sure she can, Hayes said, dripping sarcasm. He turned to Chen. Check his ID. Chen, visibly uncomfortable, picked up Jamal's wallet. Jamal Thompson, he read aloud. 16. Lakeside High. He held up a student ID with an honor roll sticker. He's an A student. Hayes didn't even look. So, honor roll kids steal too. A small crowd began to gather, families exiting stores drawn by the commotion. Phones came out. 15, maybe 20 people started recording. Jamal could feel every lens on him burning his dignity away. I didn't steal anything, he said, voice breaking. Please, just check the security footage inside. Turn around. Sir, if you just... I said turn around. Hayes yanked his arm, slammed him against the hood, the impact forcing air from Jamal's lungs. Hands behind your back, Jamal obeyed, eyes wide with fear. He wasn't resisting, just trying to breathe. His mother's words echoed in his head. Always come home safe, baby. Hayes kicked his feet apart and started patting him down, rough and deliberate, his knee pressing into Jamal's leg. Officer, please, shut your mouth. Hayes unzipped the backpack and spilled its contents onto the pavement. Books, papers, a worn calculus textbook, a copy of The Souls of Black Folk for English class, and a folder labeled Stanford Application Materials. The folder popped open, papers scattering in the breeze. Hayes picked up one sheet and smirked. Stanford, huh? What did you do, steal the acceptance letter too? A few in the crowd laughed uncomfortably. Jamal felt his stomach twist. That's mine, he said softly. I earned that. Sure you did. Hayes tossed the folder aside, pages fluttering across the asphalt. Jamal watched helplessly as his future blew away in the wind. That was when Emily Carter burst out from the plaza doors, iPad clutched in her hands. Officers, wait, she shouted, breathless. I'm the clerk from Fashion Hub. I sold him that sweater 10 minutes ago. Hayes barely glanced at her. Ma'am, step back. I have the transaction record right here, she insisted, thrusting the iPad forward. On the screen was a clear digital receipt. Jamal Thompson, debit card ending in 3948, $47 or hours, 11:27 a.m. That's him, Emily said, voice shaking. He paid. I remember because he said it was for his sister's birthday. Chen hesitated. Hayes, maybe we should... We're following protocol, Hayes snapped. He turned back to Emily. Ma'am, this is police business. Step back now. But he didn't steal anything, she cried near tears. Step back. Hayes's hand moved toward his weapon. Emily flinched, retreating, but didn't leave. She stood at the edge of the crowd, shaking her head. Jamal caught her eye. Thank you, he mouthed. She nodded, one tear slipping down her cheek. Hayes's radio crackled. Unit 43, what's your status? Suspect detained, he replied. Requesting backup for transport. Backup en route, the dispatcher said. Be advised, suspect may be armed. The words hit Jamal like a bullet. What? I'm not armed. I don't have a weapon. Hayes's hand went to his gun. Get on the ground. I'm not armed. On the ground. The weapon came free in a smooth, practiced motion. The crowd screamed. Jamal dropped to his knees, hands raised high. Please don't shoot. I'm not resisting. Please, face down. Hands behind your head. He lowered himself onto the asphalt. The ground was hot, rough, biting into his cheek. Gravel pressed into his skin. He laced his fingers behind his head, shaking uncontrollably. Hayes holstered his weapon, then dropped his full weight onto Jamal's back, knee grinding into his spine. I can't breathe, Jamal gasped. Stop resisting. I'm not resisting. Then stop talking. Pain shot through Jamal's shoulder as Hayes twisted his arm. The crowd shouted now, angry voices, pleading ones. He's a kid, someone yelled. Check the receipt. Another voice, quieter. This is messed up, but no one stepped forward. Phones stayed up, and then through the chaos Jamal heard a sound, his phone buzzing on the ground beside him. The screen lit up with a name, Dad calling. It rang and rang. No one answered. By the time the second patrol car pulled up, the world had gone silent for Jamal Thompson. He lay on the hot pavement, cheek bleeding, chest heaving, surrounded by disbelief. Around him people filmed, the wind tugged at scattered papers, and a young woman stood crying at the edge of the crowd. In that moment, no one knew that 8 miles away, a black SUV was already speeding toward Brookside Plaza, and inside, a man in a dark suit had just seen the video of his son face down on the pavement, and that was when everything began to change. The air inside the police cruiser felt thicker than heat alone could explain. Jamal sat in the back seat, wrists cuffed, shoulder throbbing where the joint had twisted out of place. The window beside him reflected a distorted version of his face, smeared with sweat and blood, eyes red from humiliation. Outside, the streets of Brookside blurred past. Families strolled the sidewalks unaware that a child was being driven away for a crime he didn't commit. In the front seat, Officer Derek Hayes gripped the steering wheel tightly, his jaw flexing. To him this was routine. A suspect detained, paperwork to follow, justification to be written later. He didn't see the boy behind him as a person. Just another profile, just another arrest to pad his record. His partner, Officer Michael Chen, sat quietly beside him, eyes fixed out the passenger window. He had seen Hayes lose his temper before, but never with someone this young, this obviously frightened. Every instinct in Chen told him something was wrong. But protocol, the invisible armor of obedience, kept his mouth shut. The car pulled into Brookside Police Station, a gray building that smelled of burnt coffee and fluorescent lights. Inside, Officer Nicole Harris looked up from the front desk as Hayes escorted Jamal in, hand still gripping the teenager's arm. "Name?" she asked automatically. "Jamal Thompson," Jamal said quickly, desperate for someone to listen. "But I need to call my parents." "Suspected retail theft," Hayes interrupted, dropping paperwork onto the counter. "Brookside Plaza, run his record." Harris typed into her computer, eyebrows drawing together. "No priors, clean," Hayes smirked. "First time for everything." "I didn't steal anything," Jamal said again, louder this time. "I showed you the receipt." "The cashier, receipts can be forged. Witnesses can lie." "So can cops," Jamal shot back before he could stop himself. Hayes's face darkened, a flicker of rage behind his eyes. He took a step forward, but Sergeant Robert Diaz's voice cut through the tension. "That's enough, Hayes. My office now." Hayes froze, jaw tight, then gave Jamal one last glare before stalking down the hall. Diaz turned to Chen. "Process him." Chen nodded silently and removed the cuffs. Red marks circled Jamal's wrists like bruised rings. "This way," Chen said softly, leading him down a narrow corridor. The holding room was small, 10 feet square, gray walls, metal table bolted to the floor. A camera blinked red in the corner. Chen gestured toward a chair. "Sit tight. This'll get sorted out. When can I call my parents?" Jamal asked. "Soon," Chen replied, though he didn't sound sure. "I promise." The door shut, and the lock clicked. For a long time, Jamal just sat there, listening to the faint hum of the air conditioner. His shoulder pulsed with pain, but the ache inside, humiliation, disbelief, was worse. He looked at the camera. "Is anyone watching this?" he asked softly. "I'm innocent. I didn't do anything wrong." The red light blinked back at him, impassive. Somewhere in another wing of the building, Sergeant Diaz stood in his office, staring at a monitor. On screen were images from social media, videos already uploaded by bystanders at the plaza. They showed everything: the knee on the back, the crushed shopping bag, the crowd shouting. Justice for Jamal had started trending within minutes. Hayes stood across from him, arms crossed defiantly. "We responded to a call. The description matched." Diaz rubbed his temples. "That description matches half the teenagers in this county." "I made a judgment call," Hayes said stiffly. "Your judgment call is all over the internet." Diaz turned his monitor so Hayes could see. "That's you kneeling on an unarmed kid. That's his face bleeding. That's the receipt you crumpled on the ground. You know what this looks like?" "The optics are fine," Hayes muttered. "Fine?" Diaz barked a humorless laugh. "The kid had proof." The clerk vouched for him. Security footage confirms his story. And you still brought him in. Better safe than sorry, or better scared than accountable. Dispatch said he might be armed, Hayes protested. Based on what? Diaz shot back. A security guard who pointed at the first black kid he saw. Hayes clenched his fists. I don't care what you appreciate. Diaz stood, voice low but hard. You drew your weapon on a 16-year-old honor student. I'm releasing him, writing a report, and hoping to God this doesn't turn into a lawsuit. Hayes's expression twisted into a smirk. The kid'll be fine, Sarge. He's got Stanford. This'll just be his wild college story. Diaz's tone dropped cold. Get out of my office. When Hayes left, the sergeant sank into his chair. He opened another video, one from a different angle. The sound of Jamal's voice filled the room. I can't breathe. Please don't shoot. The sergeant stared at the screen. The boy's fear reflected in his own tired eyes. Then his phone rang. He answered, listened for a moment, and went pale. FBI for a shoplifting case? He hung up slowly, stood, and straightened his uniform. Something about this didn't feel like routine anymore. At the front desk, Officer Harris looked up as the station doors burst open. 10 people in Navy FBI jackets swept in, moving with sharp, purposeful precision. Tactical vests glinted, badges flashed. Can I help you? Harris stammered. A woman at the front, tall, calm, eyes sharp, held out her identification. Agent Laura Simmons, FBI, we're here for Jamal Thompson. Harris blinked. On what grounds? We don't need grounds, Simmons said coolly. Where is he? Diaz emerged from his office, stunned. What's going on? Federal investigation, Simmons replied, showing her badge again. Where is Jamal Alexander Thompson? He's a suspect in a shoplifting case, Diaz said, struggling to keep his composure. He's not a suspect, Simmons corrected. He's a minor under federal protection. You're holding him illegally. Hayes stepped forward from the hallway, face red with disbelief. Federal protection for a shoplifter? Simmons turned to him. You're Officer Hayes? Yes, ma'am. We'll talk later, she said flatly. Where's the boy? Diaz swallowed hard. Holding room, North Corridor, Simmons signaled to 2 agents. Ramirez, Stewart, get him. The agents moved instantly. Hayes tried again, louder this time. This is local jurisdiction. Was? Simmons corrected without turning. When you detained a minor without probable cause and denied him counsel, it became federal. Down the hall, the 2 agents reached the small holding room. They opened the door to find Jamal sitting alone, eyes wide with confusion. Jamal Thompson? Ramirez asked. Jamal nodded, heart pounding. The agent showed his badge. FBI, you're safe now. Come with us. What's happening? Jamal whispered. You're not in trouble. We're getting you out. They led him through the hall toward the lobby. Jamal stumbled to a stop as the sight hit him. 10 federal agents in formation, Diaz pale behind his desk, Hayes frozen mid-step. Simmons turned to him. Jamal, are you injured? He touched his face and shoulder. A little, but I'm okay. Did anyone deny you a phone call or legal counsel? Jamal hesitated, glancing at Hayes. Yes, multiple times. Simmons's jaw tightened. Noted. She pulled out her tablet, began recording. Officer Hayes, speak to your union representative. Everything you say from now on is part of a federal inquiry. Hayes's mouth opened, then closed again. The room had gone utterly silent, and then the doors opened one last time. A man in his late 40s stepped inside, tall, composed, wearing a dark suit and the kind of presence that silenced a room. The agent straightened instinctively as he entered. His gaze swept the space once, landing on Jamal. Dad? Jamal's voice cracked. The man crossed the lobby in 3 strides and gripped his son's shoulders, eyes scanning for injuries. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? Jamal tried to speak, but only managed a shaky nod. The man turned to the officers, his voice shifting from fatherly to commanding. I'm Director Marcus Thompson, FBI Regional Bureau. He paused, letting the words settle. And this is my son. Every sound in the room seemed to vanish at once. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly above them, and for the first time since the chaos began, Jamal felt something he hadn't in hours. Safety. But the silence that followed wasn't just fear. It was the sound of a system realizing too late that justice had just walked through its own door. The weight of silence inside the Brookside police station was almost tangible. Officers who had been moving about only moments before now stood still. watching the tall man in the dark suit who had just identified himself as Director Marcus Thompson of the FBI. His presence commanded the room without force. It was authority born of precision and purpose, of decades spent enforcing the very laws now trampled underfoot in this station. Beside him, Jamal stood trembling, unsure whether to feel relief or disbelief. His father's hand rested firmly on his shoulder, steady, protective, and unyielding. Marcus's gaze swept across the lobby, landing finally on Officer Derek Hayes. "I watched everything," Marcus said, voice calm but laced with fury beneath its control. "The stop, the search, the force, the denial of rights." Hayes stiffened. His throat bobbed as he swallowed, but he said nothing. Marcus turned slightly toward Sergeant Diaz, whose face had gone pale. "Your department detained my minor son without cause. You ignored proof of purchase, credible witnesses, and your own body camera protocols. He was assaulted, humiliated, and denied counsel." "Director Thompson," Diaz began, voice faltering. "We responded to a theft in progress. The description, why, was a lazy assumption." Marcus cut in, sharp as a blade. "Black male, late teens, dark sweater, backpack. That's not a description. That's a template for racial profiling." From somewhere behind the desk, Agent Laura Simmons held out a tablet. "Director, we've reviewed the mall footage," she said. "It's exactly as you saw, a different suspect altogether. White male, early 20s, red sweater, no backpack. Caught on security cameras 6 minutes before the confrontation." Marcus took the tablet and turned it toward Diaz. "That's your actual thief. Different age, different clothing, different race. Yet Officer Hayes decided my son fit the bill because he was the only black teenager in sight." The room was so quiet that even the hum of the fluorescent lights sounded intrusive. "Officer Hayes," Marcus continued, "you put your knee on my son's back while he begged for air. You mocked his achievements. You denied him a phone call. You drew your weapon on an unarmed teenager holding a shopping bag and a receipt." His voice grew colder. "You violated his 4th, 5th, and 14th Amendment rights. You assaulted a minor without cause. You traumatized an innocent boy because of your prejudice." Hayes's mouth worked soundlessly. "I was following training, sir." "Your training?" Marcus repeated, taking a step closer. "Your training taught you to ignore evidence? To profile? To brutalize a child?" His tone sharpened to a point. "Your training failed you, and everyone you were sworn to protect." He looked at Simmons. "Effective immediately, Officer Hayes is suspended pending federal investigation. Collect his badge and weapon." "Yes, sir," Simmons replied. Diaz's lips parted as if to intervene, but Marcus's stare stopped him cold. Hayes's hands trembled as he unclipped his badge. It hit the desk with a dull metallic sound. He followed with his service weapon, ejecting the magazine before setting it down. The final click echoed through the room like a verdict. Marcus turned back to his son, his expression softening. "Let's get you out of here, Jamal." The teenager nodded, relief flooding through his chest. The agents closed ranks as they guided father and son toward the front doors. But Marcus paused before stepping outside, glancing back over his shoulder. "This doesn't end here," he said. "There will be accountability. Real accountability, not just for one man, but for every system that allowed this to happen." Outside, the air hit cool and sharp against Jamal's skin. He leaned against his father's car, shaking. Marcus stayed beside him, one hand on his shoulder. "You're safe now," Marcus murmured. "We're going to handle this." "Dad, I know," Marcus interrupted gently. "You did nothing wrong." The reassurance broke something inside Jamal. The tears came hard. Anger, humiliation, fear, all spilling at once. Marcus pulled him close, holding him the way he had when Jamal was little and afraid of storms. "Let it out," he whispered. "You're safe." Minutes passed before Jamal's breathing steadied. When he finally looked up, his father's eyes were fierce again, not with rage, but resolve. "Here's what happens next," Marcus said quietly. "We make sure this means something. Not just for you. For every kid who doesn't have an FBI director for a father." "What do you mean?" Jamal asked, voice still raw. "You'll see," Marcus said, straightening his tie. "Come on." Back inside the station, the transformation was already underway. Agents Simmons and Ramirez were methodically collecting evidence, seizing body camera footage, dispatch recordings, and every witness statement. The local officers stood aside, uncertain, stripped of the authority they once wielded so casually. Status report? Marcus asked as he entered. Simmons replied, "All footage secured, Director. Dispatch logs backed up, civilian witnesses on site and cooperating." "Good," Marcus said. "Bring them in." 5 minutes later, the lobby filled again. Emily Carter, eyes red from crying, stepped forward, clutching her iPad. Beside her stood Mrs. Evelyn Ramirez, a local resident who had spoken up at the plaza. Behind them, the nervous figure of Kevin Morales, the mall security guard, fidgeted with his badge. Marcus addressed them all. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice calm but unyielding. "What happened today was wrong, but what happens next, that's on us." He gestured toward a large monitor set up by the agents. "Watch this." The screen played the mall's security footage. It began not with Jamal, but with the real thief, a white man stuffing electronics into a backpack before slipping out the back door. Then it showed Morales scanning the plaza, passing over groups of white, Asian, and Hispanic teens, stopping only when his eyes found Jamal, the sole black teenager in view. The crowd watched as multiple angles followed the events that unfolded next. Hayes tackling Jamal, the crowd shouting, the torn shopping bag, the scattered papers. The sound of Jamal's voice pleading echoed softly through the speakers. When it ended, Marcus turned toward Morales. "Mr. Morales," he said evenly, "you're not a police officer, so I can't suspend you. But I can do something else." He took out his phone and dialed a number. "Mr. Delgado," he said when a voice answered. "Director Marcus Thompson, FBI. I'm calling about your security contract at Brookside Plaza." A pause. "Yes, I saw the news," came the faint, nervous response. "I have the guard here and the one who identified my son based solely on skin color," Marcus said. "He told police he acted on instinct. I need mandatory training for every guard you employ, implicit bias, constitutional rights, de-escalation, quarterly, not one time." "Yes, sir," Delgado stammered. "And Mr. Morales," Marcus continued, "will be your first trainee. After he completes the program, he'll help teach others what not to do." Morales's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, sir. I'm so sorry. I didn't think you assumed," Marcus said quietly. "And that assumption almost destroyed someone's life. Don't apologize to me." "Apologize to him." Morales turned to Jamal, voice breaking. "I'm sorry."
"I just saw my skin," Jamal finished softly.
"You saw my skin?" Morales nodded, crying. "Yes, and I was wrong. Then learn," Jamal said. "Do better." Marcus shifted his gaze to Emily Carter. "Miss Carter, you tried to help. You had evidence and they dismissed you. Would you speak at a community meeting next week? Tell your story." Emily straightened, tears still on her lashes. "Yes, absolutely." Marcus turned next to Mrs. Ramirez, whose calm strength filled the room. "You spoke up when others didn't," she nodded. "I've lived here 40 years. I've seen this happen too many times. I'm tired of staying quiet." "Then don't," Marcus said. "Your voice matters." Finally, he turned to the officers, Diaz, Chen, and Hayes. Hayes stood apart, staring at the floor. Chen looked torn, guilt shadowing his face. "Sergeant Diaz," Marcus said, "the FBI is launching a full investigation, but reforms can start now. Hayes is suspended, effective immediately. I want mandatory training for every officer. Implicit bias, de-escalation, constitutional rights." Diaz nodded. "Done. And a community oversight board, I'm with real power. Officer Chen will chair it." Chen blinked, startled. "Me?" "You knew something was wrong," Marcus said. "You hesitated, but you didn't act. Now you have a chance to do better." Chen's voice wavered. "Yes, sir. I want that." Marcus looked at Hayes last. "You'll complete a restorative justice program. When you finish, you'll speak to other officers about what you did and why it must never happen again." Hayes's voice cracked. "Why give me that chance?" Marcus's reply was steady. "Because my son deserves a world where police do better. That starts with you." Then, for the first time, Hayes looked up, not as a cop, but as a man broken by what he'd done. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Marcus didn't look away. "Don't tell me," he said. "Tell him." Hayes turned to Jamal, his voice trembled. "I was wrong. I saw your skin before I saw you. I'll never forget that." Jamal's reply came quiet but sure. "Then make sure no one else does either." And in that moment, in that sterile, fluorescent-lit lobby, something rare happened. Justice didn't just speak through authority. It spoke through accountability. And for the first time, Brookside Police Station didn't feel like a fortress of power. It felt like a place where truth had finally walked in. The following morning, the Brookside Police Station was no longer a building humming with quiet indifference. It was the epicenter of a reckoning. Reporters gathered outside, their microphones pointed toward the front doors. Inside, FBI agents filled every hallway. The tone of the air had changed. It wasn't the familiar rhythm of a precinct anymore, but something colder, cleaner, the sound of accountability taking root. In the main conference room, Director Marcus Thompson stood at the head of a long table. Sunlight cut through the blinds in sharp, uneven lines, illuminating the faces of those seated before him. Sergeant Diaz, Officer Chen, Officer Derek Hayes, Emily Carter, Kevin Morales, Mrs. Evelyn Ramirez, and several federal agents, including Agent Laura Simmons. Marcus had spent most of his career studying how institutions decayed from within, how unchecked arrogance became culture, how silence became complicity. He wasn't going to let this case become another headline that flared and faded. What happened to his son would not end with apologies. It would end with reform. He placed a stack of folders on the table, each labeled Accountability Briefing, Brookside Police Department. What happened to my son is no longer a local issue, Marcus began, his voice steady, resonant. This is about the systemic rot that allows assumptions to replace evidence, bias to replace reason, and violence to replace restraint. Nobody spoke. Hayes's gaze stayed fixed on the table. Chen sat rigid as if afraid to breathe. Marcus turned to Diaz. Sergeant, the federal investigation begins immediately, but what we do now today will define whether this department ever regains the trust of the people it serves. Diaz nodded. Understood, Director. Good, Marcus said. Then we start here. With truth. He gestured to Agent Simmons, who connected a drive to the projector. The screen came to life with video footage, angles from security cameras, body cams, bystanders' phones, spliced together into a seamless timeline. The sound of the plaza filled the room. The alarm, the shouting, the humiliated voice of a boy trying to breathe. Every word, every scream echoed against the walls. No commentary was needed. The evidence spoke for itself. When it ended, silence fell. Not the brittle kind that followed fear, but the heavy, suffocating silence of realization. Marcus folded his hands. You've all seen what the world saw, he said. The question is, what will you do about it? No one answered. Emily Carter, sitting at the end of the table, wiped at her eyes. All I wanted was for them to listen, she said softly. I showed them the receipt. I showed proof. But Officer Hayes, her voice broke. Hayes shifted in his chair. He looked smaller now, stripped of his badge, stripped of his certainty. I didn't believe you, he said quietly. I thought you were interfering. You thought your authority was more important than truth. Marcus finished for him. Hayes nodded once, a small broken motion. Kevin Morales spoke next, voice trembling. I made the call. I saw a kid in a dark sweater and thought he fit the description. I didn't even stop to think how many people that could describe. He rubbed his eyes. I didn't see a person. I saw a profile. I've been doing this job for years and never realized how dangerous my instincts were. Marcus regarded him carefully. Acknowledgement is a start, but awareness without action changes nothing. He took a breath and straightened. Here's what happens next. Every eye in the room lifted toward him. First, Marcus said, Officer Hayes is suspended without pay pending the outcome of the federal inquiry. Upon completion, he will be required to undergo a full restorative justice program. And if he completes it successfully, he will assist in training officers on the dangers of bias and excessive force. Hayes looked up, stunned. Why give me that chance after what I did? Because accountability isn't just punishment, Marcus replied. It's transformation. If my son can find it in himself to face you without hate, the least you can do is learn from what you did to him. He turned to Diaz. Second, Sergeant, every officer in your department will undergo quarterly training, implicit bias, de-escalation, and constitutional rights, mandatory, not optional. The FBI will provide the curriculum. Diaz nodded again, this time with something like resolve. We can do that. Third, Marcus continued, a community oversight board will be established immediately. It will have full disciplinary authority, and direct access to case reviews. Officer Chen will chair it. Chen's head snapped up. Me? Marcus nodded. You knew what was happening was wrong. I saw it on your face. But hesitation isn't the same as courage. This is your chance to turn that hesitation into leadership. Chen swallowed hard. Yes, sir. I'll do it. Fourth, Marcus said, body cameras for every officer. Footage will be automatically uploaded and accessible to the public within 72 hours. No edits, no filters. Diaz leaned forward. That's ambitious, sir. Marcus's eyes didn't waver. Justice should never depend on secrecy. He turned lastly to Morales. Fifth, Brookside Plaza's security firm will implement the same training program. Implicit bias isn't a police problem. It's a societal one. Mr. Morales, you'll be the first participant and later an instructor. Morales' voice cracked. Yes, sir. I understand. Marcus exhaled slowly, his gaze moving from one face to the next. This will not be easy. Change never is. But the cost of doing nothing is far greater. He looked to Jamal, who sat quietly beside Agent Simmons, watching it all unfold. His cheek still bore the faint mark of asphalt. His shoulder was in a sling. He looked both fragile and strong at once, a boy forced to grow faster than any 16-year-old should. Jamal, Marcus said softly, you have anything you'd like to say? Jamal hesitated, then rose to his feet. The room's attention shifted to him. He took a breath. I'm 16, he began, voice low but firm. I study hard. I help coach Little League. I volunteer at a food bank. I've never been in trouble, not even detention. He looked at Hayes, eyes unwavering. But none of that mattered to you. You didn't see any of it. You saw my skin and you decided I was a criminal. That's all it took. The words hit harder than any reprimand could. Hayes' face crumpled. Jamal continued. You should be sorry, not just to me, but to everyone you've ever looked at and assumed the worst. You should learn. You should teach other officers not to do what you did. Because not everyone has a dad who can walk into a police station and stop it. Silence again. Not avoidance this time, but reflection. Marcus placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Pride shimmered beneath the grief in his eyes. My son is right, he said. This ends today. The excuses end. The assumptions end. The violations end. Because if they don't, I'll be back and next time it won't be a conversation. He turned to Agent Simmons. File the complaint. Full investigation. Weekly updates to my office. Yes, sir, she replied. Marcus looked once more at the officers before him. The law is meant to protect, not to intimidate. The badge you wear isn't permission to dominate. It's a promise to serve. And if that promise is broken, justice will find its way in. He paused at the doorway, then glanced back at Hayes. You have a choice, he said quietly. Let this destroy you or let it rebuild you. Hayes bowed his head. I'll try, sir. Don't try, Marcus said. Do. As Marcus and Jamal stepped out into the sunlight, the cameras outside flashed in a storm of light. The father shielded his son instinctively with a hand on his shoulder. Inside the station, Diaz turned to Chen. We've got work to do. Chen nodded. Yeah, a lot. And in that moment, amidst the aftermath of chaos and shame, Brookside Police Department took its first small, uncertain step toward redemption. Over the next weeks, the reforms Marcus demanded began to take shape. The oversight board convened. Training schedules were set. For the first time, transparency became policy, not performance. As for Officer Hayes, he began the restorative justice program Marcus required. He sat through hours of sessions, facing victims of racial profiling, listening to their stories, learning to confront the mirror he had long avoided. It was brutal work and humbling, exposing, humanizing. And yet, piece by piece, he began to understand. Every night, Jamal watched it unfold from afar. He healed slowly on not just his shoulder, but his trust in the world. There were still scars, visible and invisible, but he refused to let them define him. He studied harder, ran faster, smiled easier. Justice, he realized, wasn't a single moment when wrongs were righted. It was the quiet persistence of people choosing, again and again, to do better than the day before. And somewhere deep inside, Marcus Thompson knew that what had begun as his personal crusade was no longer just about his son. It was about every child who looked in the mirror and wondered if their skin would make them a suspect. Brookside was changing. Not fast enough, not perfectly, but undeniably, and for the first time in a long time, justice didn't feel like vengeance. It felt like progress. 2 weeks later, Brookside Community Hall overflowed with people. Every chair was taken. Latecomers lined the walls, standing shoulder to shoulder beneath the old brass chandeliers. The air hummed with tension and expectation. A town on the edge of transformation, still bruised but finally awake. Local news cameras were positioned along the back. A banner hung behind the stage. Community Accountability Forum, Justice and Reform for Brookside. At the front sat 5 figures who had become symbols of the town's reckoning. Director Marcus Thompson, Sergeant Robert Diaz, Officer Michael Chen, Mayor Elizabeth Crawford, and Jamal Thompson. The mayor stepped up to the podium first. Her voice carried the weight of an entire city, trying to make sense of its conscience. 2 weeks ago, she began, something happened in Brookside that we can't ignore. Something that forced us to look at ourselves and ask, who are we really? She looked toward Marcus and Jamal. A 16-year-old boy, an honor student, was profiled, assaulted, and humiliated for no reason other than the color of his skin. And if his father hadn't been who he is, this story might have ended very differently. That reality should terrify all of us. The crowd stirred, some nodding, some silent, some still uncomfortable with hearing the truth spoken aloud. But we're not here just to relive what happened, Mayor Crawford continued. We're here to make sure it never happens again. Real change requires courage, and I want to thank Director Thompson and his family for showing this town what courage looks like. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then growing until it filled the hall. Marcus rose from his seat and approached the microphone. He didn't need to clear his throat or raise his voice. The room quieted instantly. 2 weeks ago, he said evenly, my son was thrown to the ground, accused of theft, denied his rights, and nearly lost his life because of a dangerous lie. The lie that a black teenager is automatically a threat. If I hadn't been who I am, that video you all saw might have ended in silence instead of reform. He paused, scanning the faces before him. Police officers, parents, business owners, teenagers who looked like Jamal. Justice, he continued, shouldn't depend on who your father is. It should be a right, for everyone. The room erupted in applause again, louder this time, waves of emotion rolling through the hall. Marcus held up a hand for quiet. But applause won't change a system. Action will. He nodded toward the screen behind him, where a slide appeared with 5 bold words: reform, oversight, accountability, education, transparency. These aren't suggestions, Marcus said. They're requirements. He outlined each reform clearly and simply. First, mandatory implicit bias and de-escalation training for every officer and security guard in Brookside. Quarterly, not once a year. The FBI will provide oversight. Second, a community oversight board with real authority, not a symbolic one. It will review incidents, issue disciplinary recommendations, and hold leadership accountable. Officer Michael Chen will serve as chair. All eyes turned to Chen in the audience. He stood, visibly nervous but resolute. A ripple of applause followed. Third, Marcus continued, body cameras for every officer with footage automatically uploaded and accessible to the public within 72 hours. No edits, no excuses. A few people gasped. The idea of transparency that bold was unheard of in Brookside. Fourth, a partnership between Brookside PD and the FBI to build a model de-escalation program. One that focuses on empathy, not escalation. And finally, fifth, community inclusion. Because reform doesn't work unless everyone is part of it. The applause this time didn't stop. People were on their feet. Some cheered. Some cried. For the first time, hope felt real, tangible. Not something promised, but something built. When the room quieted again, Marcus stepped aside and nodded toward Sergeant Diaz. Diaz approached the podium slowly. His uniform looked heavier than usual, as though he carried the weight of every mistake his department had ever made. He gripped the edges of the podium, knuckles white. On behalf of the Brookside Police Department, Diaz began, I want to apologize to Jamal Thompson and to this community. We failed you. We failed our duty to protect everyone equally. He looked down briefly, then back up. Officer Hayes has resigned. He's enrolled in a restorative justice program. But that's not enough. Because this isn't just about one officer. It's about a culture that allowed this to happen. That's what we're fixing. And I promise you, this time it's not words, it's work. The crowd rose again, applause thundering through the hall. Mayor Crawford returned to the microphone. Jamal, she said gently, would you like to say something? Jamal froze for a moment, caught off guard. He glanced at his father, who gave a small nod. Slowly, Jamal stood and walked to the podium. The crowd hushed. Hundreds of eyes on him, lights bright and blinding. He didn't have notes. He didn't need any. I was just shopping, he said quietly. His voice wavered once, then steadied. But they saw a threat. He looked out at the sea of faces. Adults, teens, reporters, police. Don't let that be your kid's story. 19 words. 6 seconds. And the room exploded. People leapt to their feet. The applause was thunderous, echoing against the old wooden walls. Emily Carter wiped her tears from the third row. Mrs. Ramirez stood tall, fist raised. After the meeting, people lined up to shake Jamal's hand. Parents, teachers, young kids who told him he was brave. He smiled through exhaustion, overwhelmed but proud. Among the crowd, Officer Michael Chen approached. Jamal, he said quietly, I want to apologize, and personally, I should have done more that day. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't stop it. Jamal studied him for a moment. You were uncomfortable, he said softly. I could see it, but uncomfortable isn't the same as doing something. Chen nodded, shame and gratitude mingling on his face. I know, that's why I'm taking the oversight board job. I want to make sure this never happens again. He extended his hand. If you'll let me. Jamal looked to his father. Marcus gave a small, approving nod. Jamal turned back and shook Chen's hand firmly. Then let's work together. Chen's eyes glistened. Thank you. I won't let you down. As Chen walked away, Marcus draped an arm over Jamal's shoulder. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. For what? Jamal asked. For shaking his hand. That took courage. Jamal followed Chen with his eyes, watching as the officer joined a group of community members to discuss the reforms. Maybe he meant it, Jamal said softly. Maybe he won't follow through, but at least now he has the chance. Marcus smiled faintly. And you gave it to him. That's what matters. 3 months later, the leaves in Stanford's courtyard turned gold and crimson. Jamal stood in his dorm room unpacking boxes. He paused when he found the gray sweater, the same one he'd bought for Sophia, the one that had nearly cost him his life. He'd washed it, folded it neatly, and kept it, not as a reminder of pain, but of resilience. His new roommate walked in. Nice sweater, he said casually. Where'd you get it? Jamal smiled, eyes distant. Long story, he replied. Remind me to tell you about the day I learned the difference between power and justice. Back in Brookside, Officer Hayes completed his restorative justice program. He stood before a group of rookie officers, hands shaking slightly as he told his story, not to justify but to warn. Bias isn't always hatred, he said. Sometimes it's blindness. And that blindness almost destroyed a kid's future. Don't let it destroy yours. Officer Chen, now head of the Oversight Board, worked with the FBI to implement every reform Marcus had demanded. The plaza's new bias training protocol was adopted by 19 shopping centers across the country. One moment of injustice had sparked a movement of accountability. And those scars remained, both on Jamal's body and in the hearts of everyone who'd witnessed that day. Something larger had taken root. Change. As Marcus Thompson watched a live news segment months later, Brookside police reform recognized nationally, he turned to his son and asked, So, what do you think? Jamal smiled faintly. I think justice shouldn't depend on who your father is, he said. It should be a right for everyone. Marcus nodded slowly, pride and sadness mingling in his chest. And in that quiet moment, with the world still imperfect but undeniably better, both of them knew the truth. Change doesn't start with luck. It starts with courage. It starts with us.